In this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast, we talked to a retail apparel entrepreneur who built his business over the last few years, and we talk about blue ocean strategies for direct-to-consumer brands. Let's jump right into this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast. Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Michael Coughlin, CEO of apparel company The Blue Ocean Life. Blue Ocean Life is a lifestyle clothing brand designed for people seeking natural ways to improve their wellness. Michael, thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about your company and why you started it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Like you mentioned, we're not just a clothing brand. We have a hugely important purpose. That is to improve mental health for everybody. I mean, it's probably the biggest problem we face in the world today. I mean, it's basically a crisis right now. So the clothing is just a part of the story. We're all about building a community, spreading that message and how you can make your life happier and healthier. And each one of our clothing designs is sort of about a little bit of aspect of mental health or physical health or something else. And we also donate a portion of our profits to a nonprofit dedicated to mental health. So yeah, it's a fantastic story. I mean, how it began.
How did tell us about why you created this business?
Well, it's a funny story. I'm someone that believes in destiny because if I didn't go broke, this never would have happened. So it sort of starts way back about 10 years ago. I was in my late 20s. I was overly ambitious. I was working at a startup company in New York City, a marketing agency in search, working in Google AdWords, which was just getting off the ground back then.
Yeah.
And I basically said, you know what? I don't want to work for anybody else anymore. I know search better than anybody else. I want to start a digital ad agency. And I quit my job cold turkey. I started a company, an agency with a friend of mine and colleague at the same company. And we were left off, and it was a painfully slow financial death after doing so. We were in the middle, we were still in the financial crisis. This was around 2010, and basically slowly went broke. And basically what happened is the contract I signed was bogus. It was poorly written. It was in his favor. Everything blew up in the partnership. I ran out of money. I couldn't afford my rent anymore. My parents had moved down to Cape Cod in Massachusetts, basically where I grew up going to the beach all the time. So I ended up moving back with my parents. I was about 30 years old. I was living up in New York City a couple years prior, and everything seemed to blow up on me. But it was interesting. It was that going broke was sort of the beginning and the metamorphosis to where I am today. So obviously Cape Cod is near the beach. It's near the ocean. And at the time I was battling a lot of anxiety. I have a history of anxiety. I've lived through a lot of trauma in my life. And I started to feel like I wasn't in the city anymore, and I was by the beach, and I'm saying, geez, my mental health is better. Like I'm sleeping better. I feel better. My anxiety is going down. That was one element of it. But I also read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which is about why my other business failed, meaning I was in a saturated market, which they deem as a red ocean, and a bloody battle for profits. And essentially, we were drowning in that ocean. And sort of, it was an epiphany when I was reading about Blue Ocean Strategy. I was learning about the benefits of being in nature and by the ocean. And another book called Blue Mind, which I read, which was about the benefits of being near the ocean and the scientific research behind it. And sort of that metamorphosis is what ultimately led to Blue Ocean Life.
So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm
know,
very interested to learn about your experiences with an agency. We're a media buying firm, and I mean, that's pretty much what we do. Although I think we found our niche. So I guess my question is, what's the blue ocean strategy here? And tell us about. So blue ocean means very little competition or no competition, correct?
Yes, it means uncontested market space. So
Okay.
it's really a great. It was an epiphany in the way that you think about things. Like it changed the way I thought about life, which is actually another inspiration for the brand. Was sort of like you create happiness, you create your own. In business, you create your own market, and you don't compete for existing market space. So that's where most people go wrong in business. Is people are sort of programmed, even at a young age, when you play sports, uh, for you to win, someone else needs to lose, right?
Yeah.
But when you study blue ocean strategy and you adapt blue ocean thinking, it isn't a zero sum game. In other words, you can create a market for yourself, and you're not competing head to head with anybody. So that was adapted to life, meaning the corporate lifestyle, the business school lifestyle is all about competing. It's about you need to make more money to have more power than other people. You need to compete with another company in a certain market for leadership in that particular market. But I set out to basically create my own market in the digital space, and that became Blue Ocean Life.
That's really interesting. Um, so on the surface, it appears to be an apparel company, right? Like the
That's right.
digital nomad lifestyle, wellness.
Right.
How do your products um, serve the nomad lifestyle and wellness? Like,
Well,
tell
it's
us
all
about
about
that.
it's about the message primarily, right? So we
Mhm.
have different each one of our collections sort of has a different meaning. So for example, we have the Healing Wave collection, which is out there that's specifically to reinforce the message that the ocean is scientifically proven to have benefits for mental health.
Mhm.
Great example. I was out in California and I met some people that run an organization called the International Surf Therapy Organization, and they
Mhm.
treat veterans how to surf to help them deal with symptoms of PTSD. So basically, we donate a portion of our sales to that organization, but our design is meant to help raise awareness for that so that we can have that message go out into the public as people wear our clothing and have a conversation around the topic.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, what lessons did you learn from your ad agency experience? And what were you trying to offer with your ad agency? Was it search?
That's right. Primarily search. My background was in search. And then at
Mhm.
that time, social media marketing was emerging. So
Yep.
we were trying to be a cross channel digital ad agency at the time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And what did you learn? I mean, I imagine the first lesson is don't go in with a partner.
Yeah. Well, I was so inexperienced. I mean, that's relatively young. I mean, I think when you're 28, you think you're old, but you're really not, and you're inexperienced.
Yeah.
So in a space where you don't really need capital, you really don't need a partner. So that's number one lesson. Number two is understand the market dynamics. Now, I didn't have the business degree, which is relatively common. A lot of people start businesses, they have a certain skill set. They try to start a business because they're really good at something, but they don't understand market dynamics and they don't
Mhm.
understand the changing market and the competitive landscape. So
Mhm.
basically, I learned that certain industries, they're a race to the bottom, which is what they define as a red ocean, meaning there's an unlimited amount of competition coming into market. There's no barrier to entry. So ultimately,
Right.
what happens is you're all competing against each other, and everybody's saying, how low can I go in terms of pricing?" And I saw that. Now, interesting thing about that is I read Blue Ocean Strategy when we were in this saturated market, and I created my own. So I split with my partner. I started my own digital agency called Digital
Mhm.
Blue Creative, which was basically trying to adapt Blue Ocean Strategy to the digital landscape.
Mhm.
It was a failure too. So I because because the market's just too saturated. Like the
Right.
advertising space is driven by relationships, and I was
100%.
young and inexperienced, and I didn't have them. Therefore, I was going to fail. So that was another learning that I learned at that time. And then that failure led me to catapulting Blue Ocean Life, which was, well, could I create this blue ocean, this digital blue ocean in a different industry? Because I essentially waved the towel on the advertising space.
So what's blue ocean about it? I mean, apparel is pretty competitive, right? It's you tell us about the blue ocean component of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's all about the meaning behind the brand. I mean, if you look at a great example I always talk about when I about Blue Ocean Strategy, one of the parts of Blue Ocean Strategy is about going into a market that's typically bought for rational reasons and making an emotional type buy. So basically switching the axes. So I read about how Nike, if you think about it, the industry of shoes originally in the early days was primarily about function, meaning you would wear shoes that are comfortable for your feet. It was primarily a functional buy. But really, what Nike did, which was one of the most successful brands I ever studied going back to college, was they essentially made buying shoes about something emotional. They gave meaning to the brand, being about victorious, triumphant. And that's in a way, Nike sort of created their own blue ocean, and the fact that they created that emotional connection. And what I'm trying to do is build that community. So it's not just the product, which is very high quality product. I like it. I'm wearing one right now from our Blueprint collection, but it's really about the meaning and the story behind the brand and what it symbolizes.
I get it. That's really interesting. I think I haven't read the Blue Ocean, Red Ocean situation. I've tried to
Mhm,
read it a couple times
mhm,
and I just never got to it, and I
mhm.
need to.
Yeah.
So that's really, so basically changing the emotion of why people make decisions for your product is one, could be one aspect of that.
Yeah, well, what it is, actually, a really good example too, that's easy to understand Blue Ocean strategy. It's a market. So a great example is Beats by Dre headphones, right?
Mhm.
So headphones were typically function. Okay, how does it sound, right? It was never a
Right,
fashionable statement. So
right.
if you look at Beats by Dre, what they did is they made it cool. They made the style of the headphones cool that people want to see you wearing it. So it's switching the axes of whether people are buying for function or style, like the other way around. So in other words, you can go into a market that's saturated, but if you can make it stylish or make it about have a certain type of meaning, you can create sort of a blue ocean in that way, an existing market. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. Would
Mhm.
that have helped you with your agency? Would knowing that,
No,
does it change anything for what you, yeah.
it doesn't. Here's why: because B2B sales is all functional selling,
Mhm.
meaning it's not. There's no emotional buying in the B2B space, right? So when you sell a service, the customer is another business, and they're not building an emotional connection with the product or service, right? So I said, well, I can't really get into a market because other companies have a competitive advantage. Like there's, when you're in the digital advertising space, you're getting undercut on the bottom, and you're getting the larger agencies have larger amounts of resources. They have
Yeah.
uh, people and technology. So you're basically getting on both sides. But so the for me, it was moving into, okay, what space, where do people buy based on emotion? And that's a good example of like fashion. So much of fashion is driven by emotional relationship to the brand and building that relationship. So that's why I ultimately said, if I'm trying to make this blue ocean strategy work, a place where people are buying for emotional reasons like fashion is where I want to be.
So how long did it take you to launch the apparel brand?
So there was remnants of it. I was toying with it early on a few years ago. I was it started with me posting an Instagram. I was doing the whole Nomad thing sort of before it became popular after the pandemic, and I was traveling. And I grew up in New England and Massachusetts, and the winter's horrible up there. So it sort of just started as an Instagram feed, and I said, this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I said, this Blue Ocean Life. I registered the Instagram handle, and I said, man, this is an interesting idea. And I researched drop shipping. And drop shipping for me, I was like, okay, this could be a brand, like this sort of concept and way of living that I'm portraying. And I researched drop shipping. I learned that you could start a clothing brand without having any inventory.
Hmm.
So that's sort of how I dabbled in it. And I sort of sat on it and sat on it and sat on it. And then I have a dear friend and advisor who I sort of sat down with her and I said, listen, the agency space is a dead end. I mean, it's right from the book. It's a red ocean. I'm sinking in it. It's never going to get easier. Everything is getting automated. Service providers undercutting. So I ultimately said, you know what? And she agreed with me. And that's why I went for it, is because I had someone that started multi-million dollar companies, that's been in the fashion space, that's done it, saying, well, I think you have something here. And that's sort of how I went in. And over the course of the years, I had been doing whatever it takes to stay alive, to do freelance work and do consulting. And it was a long and windy journey. But I think that advice from that mentor and advisor was really the game changer for me. And that was probably about 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago.
And so what are some of the high points you've achieved on this journey, right? Like, it's just such a different type of work than you were doing previously. Like, what are some of the learnings that someone could take away from your experiences?
Oh, well, I mean, the biggest thing I think you can take away is that the biggest lesson I ever learned is you could say that this is a low risk or no risk business because there's no inventory, there's no really upfront costs. But perhaps the biggest and hardest lesson anyone will learn is that opportunity cost is massive. So, in other words, the time you're not working a full time job is extremely expensive. Now, if I think back to the years that I struggled both doing freelance work in the agency, all of the money I left on the table by not working full time without getting benefits, that's a huge, enormous cost. And that needs to be factored in to your calculation. Also, I think that you need to get, for anybody starting a business, talk to your critics more than you talk to the people that agree with you. Because you want to, it was one of my consultants that I hired on a website called Upwork who basically punched me in the face when I came up with this concept. And he said, listen, he's like, at that time, I thought it was going to be a beach brand, right? And there's a million beach brands out there. And he
Mhm.
said, listen, he's like, you're not any different than any other beach brand out there. But that was when I realized that he was right and that the beach brand space was a red ocean, right? Another one, a competitive market space. But that was what led me to pivot again, which was basically, well, we're more than about the ocean. Blue Ocean Life is a brand, it has a message that transcends just the ocean. And being around the ocean is just one way to drive wellness. And that was so that's another good lesson there, which is speak to people that have the experience, um, and be prepared to not live the same standard of life you had previously.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's really great for a business owner to do this, when he or she is younger, because you only lifestyle creep becomes a thing, and I think one of the biggest things a lot of people fear is losing what they have,
Mhm,
and I think many people are much more, I guess, are much more motivated by losing than by winning.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Um, Yeah. Anyway, so I like your point about the critics, right? Because I 100% agree with that. Like the people who support you are going to be the people that really, really, really care about you, and
mhm.
they're not going to see you do anything wrong.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
um, so tell us about kind of like when you got your footing for the business. Like at what point did you say, okay, now we have something going here? Like what was the
Yeah.
milestone?
Yeah. I mean, it was really last year. I had an absolutely horrible last year. Um, Pandemic happened. I had all sorts of personal stuff. I almost threw in the towel. I mean, it was to the point
Mhm,
where I didn't believe that there was a path forward. I never quite did fully, but it was the turning point for me was when I again went back to the same advisor who I'd spoken to and my dear friend, and I hired her as her consultant to say,
mhm,
listen, here's what we need to do to get things back on track. Here's what needs to be done. And that was again, I can't thank her enough, Kristen, my friend and advisor. But really, that was the turning point where it was like, okay, this is a viable plan. There is a strategic plan that can actually work, and that is largely evolving earned media, and that's really the game changer, and that's that sort of trademarked idea that I had about digital blue strategy, which is that earned media doesn't come at any there's no per click cost, unlike where I worked in paid
mhm,
search.
mhm.
And that earned media, so if you have a good and compelling story, there's still like that's a great way to drive traffic at an efficient way. And
So
we sort of pivoted and said, listen, we need to be a content engine.
mhm,
And we're now building out our blog and content production side of the business,
mhm,
and pivoting to be, like I said, an authority in the space, which is about holistic wellness. And that is an edge that we have over many other clothing brands because you go to many other clothing brands and there's no blog, there's no, go to Ralph Lauren or Nautica or anything like that. We have an edge because we have a relevant topic that's going to be always relevant because mental health is always important. It's one of the most important things that we deal with every day. So it was that milestone and the fact that we revamped it, we rebuilt it, rebuilt all of these new collections. We started introducing embroidery prints, and that was really the turning point for me and reinvigorated me to keep going, moving forward with the company.
that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting when a company takes an idea that is like additive and creates a brand around it.
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
clothing is clothing, but you're to your point, you learn something from Nike, and there's brand, there's a perception that people have about the product. So going into COVID, stressful time for a lot of people, a lot of businesses. How did you fare, and what was your experience over the last year and a half?
Wow, it's interesting. COVID was. I also had, I mean, relevant to the story of the brand, I had a mental health crisis that happened during COVID, and I had to take leave from the business. Um, I just couldn't do it. It was related to certain things that happened in my family. All sorts of bad things happened. And it was just a question of me surviving the downturn. Because what happened is we had fulfillment partners that do drop shipping, and all those fulfillment times cut in half because they had to reduce staffing inside the fulfillment center when it was really strict back in the middle of 2020. So it was just a question of survival. I mean, and I think a lot of businesses should adopt one of my. We have a collection on our website that's about the palm tree. It's the palm tree collection, and the motto is "Bend, don't break." So it was just withstand the storm. I was going through a lot. I had to essentially outsource the majority of all of the activities of the company while I was on leave, and just basically take that attitude that bend don't break. And I knew it was a downturn, but another good analogy is about a storm. A storm doesn't last forever, and you have to know in business. An important decision is like what I learned in my old companies was that you have to know when it's worth continuing on. Whereas in the past, I knew when I hit the turbulence that, you know what, this isn't worth fighting anymore. But this time around, after reassurance from my advisor and friend, we said this is worth going through. And coming into the new year, we're really excited about 2022 because a lot of the plans that were sort of a little bit on hold, the pivoting, the content creation, that's starting to come around right now. So I'm really excited about next year. It's be a lot better year than 2020, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Mhm,
definitely.
mhm.
So your marketing efforts are really focused on search engine optimization,
Yep.
content development, certainly PR and publicity.
Mhm.
Is there any channel in particular that you feel the strongest about, that drives more or the majority of your traffic? Like, what's the tip for other business owners and e-commerce stores looking to duplicate your success?
Yeah, a great example is Pinterest.
Hmm.
So, important thing about Pinterest is it's great for fashion and apparel. It's great for wellness. People go on there to get motivational stuff. So a lot of our content is about inspiring people for a happier life or a healthy life. And it skews female, which is important to note. And our brand does skew female. In other words, the majority of our customers are female, and
Hmm.
that's a really great channel to reach them. And a really good benefit about Pinterest is that people repin your ads and repin your pins. So in other words, they last longer. So there's an earned media component. So if you're, for a great example, we pin content about wellness tips. Here's 5 ways the ocean is good for your health. Here's 7 ways to avoid burnout. And basically, relevant content gets shared. And that's what is very different from Pinterest compared to something like Instagram. You post a story, it's gone in 24 hours. You post something on Instagram, it's buried within a day. So I highly recommend, especially people in the fashion, wellness type space, industries that skew female, definitely Pinterest is a great place to do that. And that's
Hmm.
probably our most successful social media channel.
And what initiatives are you looking at for 2022? Any new lines or any strategic partnerships, or like what does the future look like over the next year for you?
Yeah, so I mean, we're rolling out more collections, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to appeal to a larger audience, not just like I mentioned, the Healing Wave collection is sort of like beachy type people when we're trying to educate them that, geez, the beach is really good for your health, like scientifically proven. And a lot of people don't know that. But what we're doing next is we're strategically, because we do drop shipping, we can essentially optimize, we can produce collections that are SEO optimized or to target specific demographics. So we're going to be launching like a fitness and wellness collection. We're going to be launching a mountain collection. So, in other words, Blue Ocean Life is metaphorical in a way, going back to the name of the book. both of the books, but it's
Mhm.
expanding to other people and saying, hey, like, just you're a Blue Ocean Life customer, you could be into hiking, you could be into the mountains, and Blue Ocean Life is going to have a collection for that. But the underlying theme and the underlying narrative across all the different collections is that it's about wellness. And this, as a good example, this collection I'm wearing right here is the Blueprint,
Mhm.
and that was sort of my ode to Blue Ocean Strategy, and it's really meant to be a collection for creators. So Blue Ocean Strategy, whether people realize it or not, the very, very creative types like artists and musicians, they're all creating their own market. They're all creating their own audience. And Blue Ocean Strategy is really what they were doing. They sort of just spelled out that creative type brain. And this is a good collection that we're trying to roll out to creative types and content creators. And we think that by reaching the content creators and having them buy in on our mess, our mission, that we can help propel the brand to new heights.
So tell us about SEO optimizing dropshipping. Like what are the mechanics behind that? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So basically, so because we don't have inventory, we can produce as many designs that we want around a certain topic. So I'll give you a good example. So we have a lot of people that love the beach and the ocean. They like the Healing Wave collection. We also create designs and shirts that are based on certain ocean quotes, like "saltwater heals everything" is a good quote. "Beach please" is a good quote. Like ocean lovers are always looking for quotes about the ocean. So we create content like on Pinterest that's optimized for based on traffic. So we can roll out collections. So for example, we could look at Google search data and say, well, saltwater heals everything is search for $20,000, 20,000 monthly searches. We can roll out multiple versions of this product, but not really have any risk because we're not ordering any inventory, right? So it's a good way you can explore with a lot of types of designs without committing to any amount of inventory. And then you can learn from what you sell and what you don't, and then you can demote those designs that don't work. So you can use drop shipping as a way to sort of test the waters and without any or at all risk.
That's pretty interesting. And do you have, and in terms of like the sales to date, which designs or what type of trends are you seeing are the top performers?
Generally, like people really like the hoodies. I mean, it's pretty
Mhm.
like people like the Healing Wave hoodies primarily because right
Mhm.
now, like as I mentioned, like people might think that we're just a beach brand, but
Mhm.
so I'd say Healing Wave is the most popular. But so to date, I'd say like Healing Wave, and there's a lot of new like women's products we're rolling out, like we're rolling out joggers, we're rolling out cut off hoodies, which are popular in women's fashion.
Mm.
So I'd say Healing Wave, just to reiterate what you said. And like trying to think of the other top products. We're excited about the Blueprint. I mean, we haven't really pushed it yet or put any
Mhm.
money into it yet, but we think that appealing to the creative types is a new opportunity. So when we look at the market, we don't really see is the brand for creative types or
Mhm.
artists or musicians or all of these people. We don't really see that. So we think there's a ripe opportunity to be like a leader in that market and essentially create our own market.
And Michael, where tell us the website as we wrap up here. Tell us the
Sure.
website for
Yep.
people can find you.
Sure. It's theblueoceanlife.com.
Very cool.
Mhm,
TheBlueOceanLife.com.
mhm.
Michael Coughlin, CEO of apparel company The Blue Ocean Life. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Take care. It was great to be on here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the LA Business Podcast. If you like what we're doing on this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple or Google Play, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations for a guest you'd like to hear on this podcast, please email me, robert@brillmedia.co. Thank you. Have a fantastic day.